Hey everyone, Ethan here again from WordTech, and I have another review for you. Now, this may seem like a little bit of an odd one because it's such an old product, but I have a very good reason, I think, for reviewing this. So, this review video is going to be on the Logitech G700S, which is identical to the G700, for those of you that don't know, just with a new finish. So, if you have a G700 or you're considering buying one of those off a friend or whatever, same mouse, so this review applies to that as well. So the first thing I want to talk about, though, is why I'm reviewing this. So this mouse, I actually had on my original rig about 5 years ago. I had the G700, not the S model. And I used that mouse for, I'd say, a good 2 years, and it was probably the best mouse I have ever owned or ever used, period. I've used a very wide variety. Most extensively would be this, a Logitech G502 Proteus core, and I also used a Rat Pro X for a while, and that was a pretty great mouse, but I keep coming back to this one. When I moved to the Proteus core, I felt like it was a good mouse overall, but wasn't exactly what I was looking for personally, and kind of an all-arounder. I felt like the Proteus core was more of an FPS mouse. So anyway, I feel like this is a legendary mouse. It's still for sale brand new. The price is great, especially because it's so old. The price has dropped quite a bit for the brand new ones, yet it still really well compares to brand new mice. So I guess the first thing I'd like to talk about is what's included in the hardware on it. So first off, you've got the mouse itself. It's overall a really nice looking mouse, I think. I like the design styling that they did here with the silver lines and black lines crossing that. That is part of the new finish, which is also a more hydrophobic finish than the original one. You've also got a little bit more of a rough texture on the side here. So from the front it looks fairly normal other than these extra buttons here. So you've got 3 programmable G buttons here along with a programmable G button back here that I usually just leave as a battery life indicator. So if you see, I can do that, and right now I don't believe it's set up, but this little LED on the side that you see, that's a profile changer. It also can do battery life. So it can hold a bunch of profiles built in. I tend to use Logitech software for their automatic game detection profiles. So I don't generally use that. I generally leave it in a battery mode when I'm playing games. So anyway, got the 3 extra buttons up here. We've got the scroll wheel, we've got the programmable button back here. And any of you that have used Logitech software before know that you can program it to do virtually anything. Then you've got the mouse wheel. It's a pretty light click. I actually do prefer a heavier mouse wheel. I think that's my only real complaint about this mouse, but that is personal preference anyway. I feel like it's just a little too easy to click twice. The mouse wheel also clicks in and side to side, left and right, which is another thing that Logitech does on a lot of their mice, and those are also programmable keys, so you can use it for something that you maybe don't use as often in a game, but want to still have quick access to with one hand. And then you've got the hyper scroll button, which is probably my favorite feature on all of Logitech's mice, probably the feature I've missed the most after getting rid of this mouse. So you basically press this in, it's a spring-loaded little button, and now the mouse wheel scrolls freely. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but the mouse wheel is indeed, you can even hear it, scrolling really quickly. Now I press it back in and it locks it back into a click mode instead, a step mode, rather than an infinite scroll. Really nice if you're scrolling through like super long web pages or something of the sort. It can also do some funny stuff in games with it, so I definitely do like that feature. Now, coming around to the left side of the mouse, you've got a really good size thumb rest. I think it's actually perfect. If you see me holding the mouse here, let's see here. If you see me holding the mouse here, you can see how big of a thumb rest it is. It's actually really comfortable. It's grippy enough to pick up the mouse, even though it's a fairly heavy mouse, which is for a good reason. I'll get to that in a minute. Anyway, though, you've got also 4 more programmable thumb buttons on the side here. And the defaults are like backwards and forwards like you'd expect on most mice, but you can program them for anything, reload, grenade, whatever you want, right? And so those are also programmable buttons. So all in all, I basically consider, they're going to say that you get like, 18 programmable buttons or whatever. I basically consider that we have 4 here, 3 more here, and then you've got the 3 built into the click here. So you basically got 10, which I still feel is a pretty good amount. I think that's good for most games. In fact, that was my main complaint when I left this mouse for the Proteus core, was that it didn't have quite as many buttons as I'd like, and in that sense felt more FPS tuned and didn't really work for MMOs very well. Anyway though, now you've got the front of the mouse, which is where your charging cable goes into. So we've got that there, and there's actually a special feature on that I'll get to in a minute. And then the back of the mouse, you can just see it's just a basic back side of the mouse. You know, there's nothing really special there, no lights or anything. And the right side has kind of a good pinky rest, although it's not really a flanged rest, so to speak. It doesn't come out at all. It's just on the side here. So it's just curved to your hand. So your pinky does rub a little bit, but, you know, some people like that, some people hate that. I personally would prefer an actual pinky rest, but some people don't care. So anyway, now back to the bottom of the mouse. So you've got a laser sensor here. I'm not actually sure what sensor in specific it is. I can't remember if Logitech discloses that about this mouse or not, but it is a great sensor overall. And then you've got, down here, you've got your on-off switch, your battery compartment, which contains one rechargeable AA battery, and then you've also got a little storage thing in here for your little Nano Receiver, which is pretty nice. So if you're going anywhere, you won't lose it, because these things are so easy to lose. It's ridiculous. So that's it for the overview of the mouse, and then you've got the cable here, and you've got the Nano Receiver here, which I already talked about. So for the build quality of the mouse, that's the next thing I actually want to get to, is I feel like this is one of the best built mice that I've ever used. It lasted me for, like I said, 2 to 3 years on my original system when I bought it, and never had a single problem, despite me abusing it pretty roughly. So I did some stuff to it that you wouldn't normally do to a mouse. And anyway, it's really overall really durable mouse. There's no real flex in it when you push on it really hard. It's really, really, really good in that sense. The back is super solid. I don't feel like this is going to break because I put my weight on it to stand up, even if I don't use the table instead of push on the mouse for whatever reason. I feel like it's a really solid contender when it comes to that. And the build quality of the cable as well is another thing I want to touch on. It is not a braided cable, but I personally don't like braided cables, and I'll tell you why. After about a year or so, they start to get worn out, the braid peels, and the rubber cable comes out. Now, I don't know if other people have had this experience. I know multiple people I know have had this experience, not just with Logitech's braids, but other companies' braids, Razer and whatnot. They tend to wear out quicker than the rubber cables, which, unfortunately, the disadvantage to a rubber cable is it is stiffer. So when you're using this cable while you're using the mouse, it does feel like you have something kind of dragging on it, but mouse is wireless for a reason, right? So this cable is not only, this is the special feature of this cable, it's not only a charging cable, it's actually a data over cable. So this cable here, when you plug it in, it actually disconnects the mouse from Logitech's Nano Receiver. So what that's doing is two things. So first off, it's charging. Second, it's allowing it to charge quicker because the wireless on the mouse completely shuts off, so that you're not using the battery, you're not using extra power to run the wireless feature. And third is that it gets rid of all interference. So if you're going to some big LAN event, let's say you're going to PDX LAN or something like that, and everybody there is using wireless mice, right? And you're like, oh crap, I'm getting, you know, interruptions in the signal. It feels like the mouse isn't responding as quick as it should. All you do is you plug this cable in, your mouse is now a wired mouse, all of that's eliminated and you're good to go. So that is definitely one of my favorite features of this mouse. Now, I've never personally cared for using that for interference purposes because I don't tend to land super often, but I'm sure that someday it will come in handy, and even so, it's just a nice feature for people to have, and it does allow the mouse to charge really quick. I've noticed the mouse will charge from 0 to 100, I'd say probably in about half an hour to an hour. It's pretty quick charging, and I mean while using it, I don't mean just while it's sitting. So anyway, we've got that. Nano Receiver is their, it's not their standard unifying receiver. It's a 1000 hertz gaming Nano Receiver that's specifically tuned to one product. So this receiver here is not like their other Nano Receivers, which look identical other than this one has a little bit different writing on it. This one will not connect to multiple devices. You can't have, you know, your mouse and your keyboard and like your headset all connected to one thing. So that is a feature that you're getting rid of, but you're getting a lot better response time that way. And it's some of the best wireless I've ever used. I've used a number of wireless mice as well, and this one responds really quickly. I wouldn't say it's as quick as, you know, wired. When I plug it in, I can feel that there's a little bit of a response time reduction there, and it does feel like it's a little bit more accurate. Now, of course, that's true with almost every wireless mouse. The nice thing is here you get to choose. So there are some newer wireless mice that Logitech has released that are going to perform better. So if you're looking for pure wireless performance, I wouldn't necessarily say this is the mouse to go. If you're a super competitive CSGO player or some other FPS game, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this mouse. It's also not good for twitchy games like that anyway, because it's a really heavy mouse. This is one of the heaviest mice I've picked up. The only one weighing more than it would probably be Logitech's G700, which is their MMO mouse with a triple click and the grid button on the side, if any of you have seen that. So it is definitely a heavy mouse. So if you're a competitive gamer, I would stray away from it. But for myself, I'm not a competitive gamer. I think the wireless is plenty good for my casual CSGO game, and it's definitely plenty good for any things like League or World of Warcraft or any kind of RPGs or anything like that, the kind of games that I personally play more. Now, if you are a competitive player though, and you don't really care too much about the wireless fact, when you plug this in wired, it then becomes a pretty good, I'd say, competitive mouse. Obviously, it's a laser, so there's a little bit of natural acceleration there. It's not an optical that's completely acceleration free. And it's a heavy mouse, of course, again, so you can't get rid of that in any way. As far as I know, too, I think you can take out the battery and still use the mouse wired. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's something they could do, which would reduce weight a little bit, but it's a pretty hefty mouse, and it's meant to be. It's not meant to be a lightweight mouse. Now, I like heavier mice. That's why I use this. I prefer something heavier, because I like to have low DPI, don't pick up the mouse very often, and I don't do Twitch shooters too much, so I'm okay with that. So now I want to talk a little bit more about the responsiveness of the mouse, though. So with this laser sensor, I will say that it is up there with some of the better laser sensors that I've used. Now, my favorite laser sensor was the Philips Twin Eye laser sensor. It is known to have a little bit of a XY axis problem, because it's actually measuring separate axes with two different lasers. But I never really experienced any issues with that, and that's what I had on my Wrap Pro X. And that was probably the best accurate laser, the most accurate mouse I have ever used in my entire life. It did honestly help me play better. Maybe not significantly over like my Proteus core, but it was definitely a noticeable difference. So I wouldn't say that this is comparable to that, but I would say comparable to any mouse that doesn't cost, you know, $200+ like the Pro X did. I would say that this is a very compelling laser. It's very accurate, it feels smooth, it feels quick, everything about it feels like it should. I don't notice any real acceleration with it. Now, of course, you know, some people are more sensitive to that sort of thing, and in that case, if you're really sensitive to acceleration, just get like an optical, right? But as a laser itself, it's right up there with the really big lasers out there, so I would definitely not worry about that unless you're looking for something competitive specific. So the other thing I want to go over here is the buttons and how they feel. So both clicks actually feel great, but that's something you'd expect. I think most companies have nailed that now. They're quick, they're durable, they don't seem to flex much. I like them a lot. They're good, they're just the right size. You can press pretty high on them to make them work. So that's a good thing there, and that's what you'd expect. But the rest of the buttons are actually pretty great on the mouse. So the your index finger right here, these buttons, your pointing finger, sorry, right here, these 3 G keys are really, really clicky, actually. You really know when you press it. There's no mush at all. There's no questioning whether or not you have clicked it. And when it clicks is when it actually sends the signal. It's not a slight distance after, like some mice's programmable buttons have, where you know you might feel like you clicked it and you didn't. So those feel great. I think the side thumb buttons are a little bit mushy. They're easy to press, and I like that. I like their weight because they're quick. But sometimes not very often, but I have noticed that sometimes I'll press it and I think I pressed it and I didn't. So the thumb buttons could, I would say, use a little bit of improvement. I actually wish that they had done that with the S model of this mouse. If they'd made those a little bit better, that would have, you know, been a good thing there, rather than just the new finish. And then you got the buttons up here. The programmable button up here, like I said, that I use for battery life. Not that it matters heavily, because you wouldn't really want to use that in gameplay. But it is definitely fairly clicky. It's not quite as good as the side buttons here, but it's not bad. It's good. So no problems there. And obviously the spring-loaded button is very clicky because, well, it's spring-loaded. So that's all the buttons, and I'm impressed with that. Now, I want to go over the reason I like this mouse so much, the reason I've come back to it time and time again, the reason I missed it for so long with all the other mice that I was using. So I feel like Logitech has a really good balance with this mouse. I feel like there's a reason this mouse has been selling for 5-6 years. And that's because Logitech has something really logical here. So you've got a good mouse with a good sensor, good features, paired with really excellent software, by the way. I'll have a separate video reviewing Logitech software for those of you that want to see that in detail. For those of you that don't know, but it's great software. Overall, I have almost no complaints about their software. And then you've got a really good package of buttons here. I feel like this mouse suits every single game that I want to play, whether you're a hardcore MMO player, whether you're an RPG player, an FPS player, anything of that sort. And I used to play World of Warcraft a lot, for example. I played it very extensively, and this was the mouse that I used on it most back when I did play it. And I will say that when I was doing that, I feel like the amount of buttons was just right for that game and for playing an MMO. I felt like it did a great job. I had no complaints. Didn't feel like I was missing a button that I needed and I had to map it somewhere else. I felt like everything I needed quick access to fit on the mouse just right. And I feel the same way with, like, FPS and stuff. You generally don't need a lot of buttons. 3 or 4 is plenty. So that's why the Proteus Core, I'd say, is totally fine if you're just an FPS gamer. Now, I change the games I play consistently a lot. I'll be into a game for a while, and then I'll switch to a completely different genre. That's just what I do, and I know a lot of other people do that. And this mouse suits everything. I don't have a specific type I played. If I just played MMOs, I'd probably go with a G600 or like a Razer Naga. If I just played FPS, I'd probably go with a Rat. But I feel like this is a really good balance. So I keep coming back to it because of the overall build quality, the overall feature-packed mouse and feature-packed software, as well as just the right amount of buttons to suit whatever it may be that you're doing. And something else to note is these 3 G keys next to your pointing finger don't ever feel like they're in the way by any means. They made it just wide enough there that I never bump them or feel like I'm pressing against them when I'm trying to click. So if you're playing like an FPS or something and you don't need a lot of keys bound to something, then it's really nice to just have those there. You can just ignore them. You don't feel like they're in the way or anything like that. So overall, my opinion of this mouse is just it's amazing. I've come back to it for a reason. I would highly recommend that you go buy it if you're looking for a mouse that is a really good all-rounder. It's great for productivity as well. It's great for everything. I feel like it's a super good balance here where I'm not compromising hardly anything. So unless you're a super competitive FPS player, I would say get this mouse. You're going to love it, and it's overall just as good as it gets pretty much. And having the data over cable, I think, is a great feature, especially for people that LAN a lot, because I do know some people that would love to have that. They can't buy a wireless mice because they can't have that interference. So anyway, I appreciate you all watching. Make sure to leave a comment below about what you think about the mouse, what your own experience has been with its durability, and keep an eye out for my 1 month and 1 year review of this mouse for durability testing. So anyway, please like and subscribe, and thank you for watching.